Cheerleading originated in the United States and remains a predominantly American activity, with an estimated 1.5 million participants in all-star cheerleading. Cheerleaders participate during middle school and high school games and most often compete outside school in state and national competitions. Its competitive aspect is what makes cheerleading its own sport. During competition season, practice is usually 7 days a week. Having a coach there at all times is not possible, so this leaves the girls unsupervised. This is when most injuries occur. Out of the United States' 2.9 million female high school athletes, only 3% are cheerleaders, yet cheerleading accounts for 65% of all catastrophic injuries in girls' high school athletics. In the early 2000s, cheerleading was considered one of the most dangerous school activities. The Journal of Pediatrics reported that the number of cheerleading accidents increased by over 100% between the years of 1990 and 2002.
Legislation was passed. The law equalized the playing field for boys and girls sports like never before. Riverdale coach Brenda Cannell lived through the change. So did retired Teaneck coach Christine Fitzpatrick. Each had a hand in starting girls sports in North Jersey in the early 70s. Now they can sit back and watch the stars shine. To them, the process was slow and gradual. They weren't looking to steal any spotlight from the boys, just have the same opportunity to play. It hasn't always been easy. There's been a backlash against Title IX by wrestling coaches who have seen their sports teams reduced in number by administrators citing the law. That was never the law's intention, but it's how it's been applied. Wednesday, the National Women's Law Center unveiled a new initiative involving Title IX, pointing out that only 41% of high school athletes are female. But unless they're starting girls tackle football, I can't see how that number will ever be equal. People forget, but there's a difference between equal and fair. Title IX hasn't always been equal, but it has been fair. The stars of today are proof that it's done far more good than bad. Check out my blog at North Jersey.
Cheerleading is not a sport, igniting some heated debate. Quinnipiac University in Connecticut cut its women's volleyball team for budget reasons, but said it would stay in compliance with Title IX, the law that mandates equal opportunities for men and women in sports, by establishing cheerleading as a varsity sport. The volleyball players sued, and the judge sided with them, saying that wouldn't fly because cheerleading is too undeveloped and disorganized to be considered a sport. A writer for the Florida Times-Union says that cheerleading is a sport, but the university was trying to skirt the rules. I have always considered competitive cheerleading to be a sport, but the way Quinnipiac tried to use its competitive cheerleading squad to get around Title IX was just wrong. But the case is bringing up the bigger issue of cheerleading's classification and what this ruling could mean for it. Competitive cheer may, sometime in the future, qualify as a sport under Title IX. Today, however, the activity is still too underdeveloped and disorganized. I take seriously that the competitive cheer members consider themselves to be athletes. But many say the ruling sends too strong of a message about cheerleading and argue that it is a sport. A writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution says there's training, practices, teams, coaches, scholarships, and most importantly, competitions. I will venture to guess that Judge Underhill has never been down south and watched a competitive cheerleading squad prepare or compete. And Fox's Providence affiliate, WNAC, also disagrees with the ruling.
That's unorganized?
I know.
Are you serious?
No,
That's more organized than anything else. I mean, this is intense. That's a sport. We talked about practices and competitions and how many people do you know, I got a cheerleading competition this week. I hear that all the time. It goes into the argument, too, that I hear all the time when I used to be a sportscaster is, well, golf's not a sport, and NASCAR's not a sport.
So, here's the big question. Do you consider cheerleading a sport?
As you've just heard, there's lots of controversy surrounding whether cheerleading is a sport or not. There has been debate on whether or not cheerleading can be considered a sport for Title IX purposes. Supporters consider cheerleading as a whole a sport, citing the heavy use of athletic talents, while critics do not see it as deserving the same status, since sport implies a competition among squads and not all squads compete. There is also subjectivity in the judging of cheerleading. In January 2009, a lawsuit involving an accidental injury sustained during a cheerleading practice was heard. The Wisconsin State Supreme Court ruled that cheerleading is a full contact sport in that state. 24 other states consider cheerleading a full contact sport. In contrast, in July 2010, there was another lawsuit involving whether college cheerleading qualified as a sport for purpose of Title IX. A federal court, citing a lack of program development and organization, ruled that it is not a sport. Cheerleading should be added to all high school injury surveillance programs. Cheerleading should not be listed as a sport. In my opinion, cheerleading should not be listed as a sport under Title IX. I agree with the judge's ruling that not all the elements of a sport are there yet. Athleticism is not the only thing that makes a sport. However, the most dangerous stunts in school should be banned. There is a limit to what the human body can safely do. In a younger child, permanent brain injury can occur with less trauma. Multiple blows to the head cause cumulative brain injury. Cheerleading should have the same regulations, procedures, and rules for concussions and other injuries as those observed in football. I agree with the commentator that just because things are not equal does not mean that they are not fair. Any male or female who is able and willing to participate in sports should have the same opportunity. But trying to artificially fill quotas is bad for high school sports. However, if there are concerns over discrimination in high school sports, you can contact the Parent-Teacher Association, local school board, or the Title IX officer who is assigned to that particular school.